Oh, it's very calming because it's moving slowly.
Anyway, so what I'm going to talk about, because I didn't intend it to be on this, but I just got drawn into it really. And it's also an awareness that Salford docks are surprisingly, the area is very close to where I live, really. And I don't know that much about it. I didn't know that much about it. So I'm going to talk about the docks and also the Playstreets, which were the first in this country that were developed by Salford, which I think are fantastic. Anyway, it came hand in hand with the the Manchester Ship Canal, and the docks were opened in 1894. And obviously they would, I think everybody knows this, it was used to bypass the port of Liverpool, which were charging great rates for any materials that were coming in. And Manchester was very much the hub of the Industrial Revolution at the time. And so it was very much linked with the development of Trafford Park as well. Oh, Derek, I'm glad you're here because you're Salfordian. And it was right next. So you had the canal, the docks, Trafford Park, and the housing in places like Ordsall, and which is of course why it's got its where it's got its name from in the famous Ewan MacColl song, "Dirty Old Town." Which was composed in 1949, and he would be worthy of a talk just by himself. He was an amazing character, born in Salford as James Miller from Scottish parents. He was married 4 times, including to Kirsty MacColl, Joan Littlewood of the theatre company fame, and to Peggy Seeger, who I think is still alive.
Kirsty MacColl was his daughter.
Was it his daughter? Oh, right. Sorry, that was wrong then. Yes, she has the same name. You're quite right. Yeah, I think that's Wikipedia getting something wrong there. But yes, thank you for that. That's quite right, because he was only married 3 times, not 4 times. I thought they got it wrong.
He was married to Joan Littlewood when he was in Salford.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they started, and he was very much a radical. He was. And his father was a trade unionist who was more or less banned from every workplace in Scotland. So that's why they moved down to Salford in the first place. Anyway, it's not about Ewan MacColl, interesting though he is. It's about Salford docks and Playstreets. And this is actually Pier 8 and 9 of the old Manchester docks, which is now the site of the Lowry Centre. As I said, it was opened in 1894 by Queen Victoria, and Salford grew to be the 3rd largest port in the country, employing over 5,000 people moving goods in and out of Manchester until it was eventually closed in 1982, which is not that long ago. This is typical of the ships that are coming through. They're quite substantial ships, as you can see, and it's also quite pleasantly named after my cat.
I was just thinking that.
Which is the reason I put it in, really.
Oh, bless.
What was coming in, it was cotton, grain, timber, but also tea, fruit, frozen meats, lard, oil, petrol and sulphur. And the exports were mainly textiles, cars and locomotives, which I will come back to. Because Manchester was a great place for the building of locomotives in Gorton at Crossleys, which it's an amazing history, really. This is where the goods were taken off from the ships. No containers then. It was all done by hand. Very, very hard job. And old dockers talking about it said it was freezing in winter because you're right next to the water, and could be so hot in the summer that sometimes you jump in the water just to cool off a bit. So it wasn't an easy job, and also the labour was very much that, where you were, it selected so many men at the port gate, and you just had to be lucky about it. So there were lots of. It became quite strong from a union point of view because of the exploitation that had been going on. Now this is one, I think it was taken in the First World War. What I like about this is the rather well, what would you call it? Pop art. It's using the camouflage which they had on ships then, which was quite interesting, wasn't it? Really, quite. You could see how it could be broken up in terms of looking at the sea with it. And here's another one from the wartime. This was First World War again. Was what they called tank boys. I don't presumably ones who were going to drive tanks. They were arriving from America on board a ship that landed at Salford. One from the Second World War. This was in July 1945, and it's in Pomona Dock. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Pomona Docks, haven't you? It's the one nearest the Manchester end. Do you know where the name Pomona comes from?
No.
No, neither did I. It was actually before it, there used to be botanical gardens here and something called the Pomona Palace. I don't know what that was. I haven't got any photos of it or anything. And it's actually named after Pomona, who was the Roman goddess of fruit trees.
Oh, bless.
Well, there
That's
you go.
interesting.
Isn't it
Well, the
just-
Royal Exchange did a play, didn't they, called Pomona? I'd have to look it up. It's a few years ago now, but it's certainly since I've been in the Elders.
Oh, right.
I remember going to see it. It was something quite sort of modernistic.
Well, there's also a bit of land round there. If you go past on the tram and you go past Cornbrook Station, there is a little lost island of plants and things there, which is very, very interesting, which you can get to, but with difficulty. And in fact, I've always thought when I go in the tram and see these areas by the side of it, wouldn't that be a good place to hide out if I was a fugitive?
Yeah.
Does anybody else have daft ideas like that? Anyway, this is the sort of thing I do. No. Let's move swiftly on. This shows how they were getting goods from the in this case directly onto barges that were taken off. And the dock number 9 in Salford docks, it was I think it was over half a mile long, that dock. And this just goes to show the sort of the width of the ship canal. When you think about it, it was an amazingly foresightful thing to do, wasn't it? To build something like that, even if it did mean cocking a snook at Liverpool. But they shouldn't have been so tough with the tax that they put on goods that came. This one I really love. It's of a locomotive being put on board, because Manchester was a major manufacturer of locomotives at Crossley Engineering. There were various other firms as well, which were only closed, I think, in the 1960s or so. Because I remember a friend of mine who'd worked there, and he came away with a pile of old photographs that they were just about to throw away of the place. And Manchester was, and to a certain extent still is, a huge centre for engineering. It wasn't so much it was a textile town, it was the towns around Manchester that were textile towns. Manchester was the engineering and financial hub of all that. And Crossley's, it was the skills, and these engines, of course, went all around the world, and some of them can still be found in places like India and Pakistan and so forth. Now, this is going slightly down the ship canal to Barton, to the Barton Swing Aqueduct. Has anybody been there?
Yeah.
It's a fantastic, it's a listed piece of work now, and I think it's absolutely incredible. And this was in fact the Eliza Jane Nicholson going through it after discharging her cargo of oil at the Barton Oil Wharf, going to the terminal docks in Salford to get stuff to take away, because obviously it makes sense if you're coming in with a load to go out with a load. That's what they tended to do.
Absolutely. Well, I've been across it because that's how you get into Manchester, on a narrowboat.
Yes. Have you actually been across that?
Yeah, I couldn't have got to you otherwise, Bernard.
Right. I was just trying to get to it. We'll come back onto that. Actually, I'll just go back on these a bit.
Yeah, don't.
These are some of the various docks that were there, and they weren't all in Salford. Some of them were in Manchester or in Trafford now. That as well, so it was very much a greater Manchester phenomenon, not just for Salford or Manchester. And this is an interesting one. It's a view of the winter quarters of Travelling Fairground. You can see with
Oh,
the
gosh.
background.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
the guy who took it circled where he was born in one of those
Oh.
caravans.
Oh. Ooh, looks cold.
What it shows is, as well, is how close housing was to all this. This, of course, is with the closure and all the stumps remaining from the demolition. Again, come back onto that. His Manchester Liners, which of course was a very big component of all this. There was a liner firm that was based in Manchester and which did a lot of the goods. And you can see the sort of level of activity that's going on there. It was huge. Here's one where they, from the Manchester Mariner, where they're putting goods directly onto railway wagons, or but usually maybe to go to storage. There were huge big silos and storage areas next to the. And here I think you can see some of the size of the docks that were there.
Yeah.
They were a fantastic thing to behold, as was Trafford Park, of course, which was the first industrial park in the world, specifically made for industry, which I grew right next to up to in Stretford, next to Metrovix, as we call it, Metropolitan Vickers, and was still very, very important during my childhood and early years. That's another one of the swing bridge, not a very good one. I'll move on from that. There's another of seeing the actual wharfs that they were coming into, the docks, Ordsall, and you can see in the background the housing estates, especially of Ordsall. I think, did they pronounce it, Derek? They pronounce it Oddsall.
Yeah, the locals call it Oddsall.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's right in the heart of what they call Old Salford, and people around here in Little Hulton still identify with their original areas, you know, that they came from, like Oddsall. Like we talked about Hume.
Yeah.
You're a liar. You're a liar.
Something going on in the background. Can you keep the door closed? Thank you, thank you. And here, of course, is Dock 9, as it was, now covered with apartments on the left and office buildings. It's closed off by a barrier, and the water in Dock 9 has now been cleaned. It's the site of the swimming leg of the Salford Triathlon.
Oh, okay.
So it's now part of the cold water outdoor swimming. It's still open at times during the winter even. I think people who swim in things like that are mad personally, but there you go. People love it. They really love it.
Just think of all the chemicals in there.
Well, presumably, hopefully they've cleaned it out. They say it's very clean, but I'll believe that. Yeah. But these, remember these, the blue cranes? These were just out. They were moved to just where the main building, the main office block was in the docks, and there were more in its heyday. There were more than 200 of these used in the docks. The cranes were dismantled eventually as they were replaced after that and scrapped, which I think is a real shame. You should hang on to a bit of your heritage. You know, it's the reason they were scrapped was because it was too expensive to maintain them. But that sort of shows the priority that they have, really, I suppose, in it. But it's ironically, I don't know whether I put a photo about this in. Does anybody know what this is? It's actually, it's called Port Salford.
Oh.
And was opened. It was there's something like £400 million worth of investment to make a new port on the Barton. So presumably it's beyond the swing bridge, that kind of area. I didn't even know this had happened. It's difficult to get actual photos of what it looks like because this is an artist's impression, but the ones I've just looked at just now, it doesn't look half as big as or as important looking as this.
No.
But the idea is it will be a distribution park served by rail, road and sea. It'll have container ship berths, a rail terminal, new road links. And it can handle 2 container ships simultaneously and 200,000 pallets of cargo at any one time. So there you go. That's a picture of overlooking, I don't know what time, I just thought it was quite a dramatic photo of the
Mm.
last trains.
So was that a plan that never came to fruition?
No, they
Bernard?
said it was completed in 2016.
Right.
So
So
somebody should
where
go
is
down
it?
on their bike and have a look at it
Yeah.
down the canal. Or perhaps if you're in your canal boat sometime, Jackie, you can go and have a look at it. And here's here's them unloading again. This is wool being delivered from transit shed to road vehicles for dispatch to Bradford, and that's imported wool from Australia. So you can see the pattern there, that it was a hub not just for Manchester and Greater Manchester, but for the whole of the north. That was 1948. That photo. It's a much earlier photo, and this one is of when they were building the Barton Aqueduct in the 1890s. I think this was, and these were called men at puddle. And I'm not sure what puddling is. Do you know what puddling is? I should have looked it up. Probably means it means some sort of digging, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're tamping it down. Yeah. Anyway, that's what they said it was.
I've heard it used in relation to the making of steel, the puddling process.
That's right. You're right. Yes, it is. Anyway, well, we'll have to leave that one for now. Now this is the famous aqueduct, and there's Jackie going down on the left-hand side in her boat.
Now that is actually a barge, Bernard.
Oh, you always go on about this, don't you?
Not a narrowboat. Well, you wouldn't call a cruise a dinghy a cruiser, would you? You know,
No,
you wouldn't call
sorry,
a dog a cat.
You're quite right to correct me. It's a barge. Does it say it's
a very boring?
And it hails
a
from
barge.
Liverpool.
That's a barge, that.
Yeah, and it's from Liverpool. You're quite right. Yeah, it is. But
Isn't it beautiful?
It's a beautiful old picture of it. Anyway,
Fabulous.
With the lady steering, yeah.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, that would be the case. They did have a thing where some sort of arrangements so that horses could go along and pull it through in the early days.
Yeah, I wonder how they did that.
Well, it might.
Are they going over the top?
I think
There's
it's
a
that
rope
walkway at the top. Can you see the walkway? Isn't is that a horse up there?
There's a rope. You can't quite make out.
It looks a bit like a horse, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it is a horse. I'm just enlarging the picture. It's hard to tell.
So
fabulous.
For those who don't know, it's a swing bridge where it takes the water, it seals it off, and then turns it to one side to allow boats like the one on the right to get through. I'm just going to show you this. Hang on a second. Oops. Trying to get it full picture and I can't. Right, there you go. Can you see that?
Oh, it's moving. Yeah.
That's the bridge. You can see there's water on it, and it's opening. It opens so that ships can pass on either side, and there's that bit in the middle. It's actually made by the guy who did those huge set of locks. What are they called? The big about 9 or 10 blocks. I'll just turn that off now. Back onto that. There's something called anyway. He's a very famous lock designer as well. But this is actually, I think, unique in the world, and it's about a few miles from all of us. If you've not seen it, it's worth going to have a look at. Anyway,
there's all sorts of amazing locks in Europe, and aqueducts and things that move, things that slide down the side of mountains. It's fascinating.
I know, it's called the Anderton locks. He did the Anderton lock.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the Anderton lift.
Yeah, the Anderton lift.
Yeah.
Go down
onto the River Weaver.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Now, moving on from the docks, this is I think this is a great photo of four boys jumping to do a header. To me. And you can see that sign. It says close to mechanically propelled vehicles and pedal cycles, interestingly. Presumably you had to get off your bike and push it. In the streets of Salford. It started in 1929 when the then Chief Constable, Major Cedric Valentine Godfrey, saw how he went on a visit to New York and found out there how the Bronx and Brooklyn had created Playstreets. to allow children to play safely. So he brought the idea back to Salford, and the first managed to get 48 streets in the Adelphi area closed between 8 a.m. and sunset to vehicle traffic. And okay, there wasn't a lot of it then, but it was driven pretty wildly, and a lot of people died because of before this. Here's another one of a play street in operation. This is Clemenson Street, junction with Ford Street. 2 years after they were introduced, had been not one road accident involving a child in the play streets, so it showed how successful they were. And there were lots more then opened in Ordsall and Seedley.
It looks like a Lowry.
Bernard, that image when if you can see the beginnings of a Lowry there.
Yes, Maureen said, yes. Actually,
the way people are standing and moving and.
Yeah. Interestingly, I've just been given a Lowry print, which is a huge, big one. It's not in this room, so I can't show you. It's about that big. Signed by Lowry.
Oh, brilliant.
That's because of the talks I did on Lowry with a friend of mine who'd interviewed him and had it all on tape, and I converted digitally. And so I've got all these tapes of interviews with Lowry, which there you go. Anyway, that's by the by. Maybe I'll do one on Lowry sometime. Anyway, so yes, it does. It looks very much like that, doesn't it? It really does. Here's an earlier photo, which looks terrific. Look at this. It must be in the early of the 20th century. I love that little car. Look at it. It's amazing. Though the front
that must have been expensive.
I know the front wheels look like they're about to come off though. But this in at the turn of the last century, there were more than 220,000 people living in Salford, up from 70,000 50 years earlier. 70. It was, Manchester and Salford, they were known as Shock City because they grew so alarmingly quickly. And of course, amongst them, there were thousands of children. In the Adelphi district, where they started off the Playstreets, there were around about 3,000 children between the ages of 4 and 12. So it shows you that they. So within 6 years, Salford had 200 Playstreets. And it was so successful that it got passed into law, and 700 were created across England and Wales by the 1950s. However, by the 1980s, they were all but forgotten. And of course, all these streets where you can see hardly any cars anyway, will all be full of cars. Or what? No, that's not true. Most of them were demolished, so there won't be anything on them. Though there is a plan now to develop new sorts of ones like this in Salford. There's a commitment by the city council there to do something about this. I don't know whether they have. Perhaps come on to that. This is actually Cross Lane in Salford, with cattle drovers leading sheep. Why were cattle drovers leading sheep? Well, there you go. And there were butchers, pawnbrokers, Mac the tailor. There are all sorts of shops that you can see. So it was a thriving district with roads like this that were pretty full of shops, a bit like the others I showed in Alexandra Park and Hume. And this was taken quite late on. It's interesting. It's Fray Bentos being advertised there.
Well, at least there's sheep and not beef.
Yes, it would be a bit cruel, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
And this is something called Apple Tree Court, shot in 1974. It was known as the Orchards and one of 3 tower blocks built in the 1960s as part of the Hanky Park slum clearance. It was described by New Order's Peter Hook, who lived in the areas as a child, as rotten and horrible like a concrete wasteland. His words were carved into a panel and placed on the side of Peachtree Court, and the blocks were emptied and demolished in 2014. So, a bit like Manchester, they got some of their housing choices wrong.
Mm.
This is children in Clemenson Street. This was demolished in 1956, and the residents moved out to Little Hulton, Cheadle, didn't know why Cheadle, and other areas of Salford. This is one of the problems of people being moved out of areas. And I know they tried to do something about it when they were doing Ordsall, but was that people weren't brought back to the same place. that the houses have been on. So the communities, even if less of them, couldn't be recreated again. But you can see with all of these streets, there's not a tree to be seen, is there? Not a tree. They were pretty bleak in a way.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, go on.
round here, Bernard, which is, you know, the big overspill estate, like Wythenshawe is to Manchester. All the streets around me are named after those places. Odsall, Weast, you know, so they must have recognised that they wanted people to still have a connection, even if it was only a street name.
It's a pretty measly connection, though, isn't it?
Oh, it's a bollocks, but you know, it's.
Easily a
I mean,
Yeah, I get your point.
it's recognising that identity, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
This is an older picture of Cross Street on a typical wet day, with the trams on it. Again, so the thing about Salford, as somebody who's been brought up here, I've lived nearly all my life in Manchester, is I know very little about Salford, and I've never known where Salford actually is, because there's no. It's it's like somebody said of Los Angeles, there is no here. You know, they didn't seem to have a place that was a centre, which I think has always been problematic about it.
It's to do with your Mancunian imperialism, you know, because it's the same. You know, in your images, it actually calls it correctly Salford Docks, but actually, I've seen signs that say Manchester Docks, and presumably a lot of the business people who control the freight and you know, lived in the posh houses on the south side of Manchester and so on. But people were dead clear. I came here in the 60s, and they said, "We're not Manx, you know. We're from Salford."
Oh, I know. There's a very strong identity.
Yeah,
There's no doubt about it.
And actually, in Love on the Dole, they're called the Twin Cities.
Hmm.
You know, the writer of Love on the Dole, Harrison, you know, he comes from Salford, and he calls it the Twin Cities. And if you look at the centre of Manchester by Victoria Station, that's where they meet.
I know. They're surprisingly close, aren't they? They're cheek by jowl. There's no doubt about it.
And the flats that you've just shown, you know, the blocks of flats like Apple Court, they replaced Hankinson Street. You know, so people still called it Hanky Park, and it's referred to as Hanky Park in Love on the Dole.
Yeah.
But lots of those flats are still there. You know, you mentioned some of them have been knocked down, but some of them are students' accommodation and so on. You know, so
anyway, what a pity that they lost the word Hanky Park. I think it's a great name for a place, don't you?
Brilliant.
Anyway, just moving on, just because we're running out of time.
Sure.
This is a Selneck bus. Does everybody remember what Selneck stood for? South East Lancashire, North East Cheshire. Selneck buses. Do you remember them? Called Selneck buses.
I remember them, yeah.
Orange and white. And this is at number 30. This is near the gates. And this is just an indication of how close housing was to the docks themselves. Right. Okay, so this is this is near the docks. This is as Halliwell Street was about to be knocked down. I think it was in the early 70s. Again, very close to the docks. And this is a Goodbye Harry Street party.
Wow.
Which is kind of sad in a way, isn't it? Don't you think? They're all looking so happy and pleased, and maybe they were to get out of it. It was prior to demolition of the area, and it was just across the road from the docks again. This is 1974. These here, I think you might just be able to see the entrance, the dock wall on the right-hand side.
Okay.
And this is Rosamond Street area during the slum clearance. and they were in the process of being demolished this time. Going on to more general pictures of Salford, this I think is a lovely one. If you look at the chattering going on and the work going on, and they were incredibly popular, these places, municipal wash house. This was 1969. They were still going strong then. I don't know what eventually happened to them, but they don't exist now. But they're real industrial machines, those, aren't they? Fantastic. Here's another one of somebody painting up their house in the house painting after work in 1969. Does anybody recognise that car on the right-hand side?
Is it a Hillman Imp?
I don't think so. I think it's those strange Ford Anglias that had the sort of
Yeah, it looks like an Anglia.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, that was, by the by, I just was interested in that. But I think that's a lovely picture showing people did take pride in where they were living. It was, you know, there was a real sense of community in some of these places. But this is as it's gradually sort of knocked down. It gets harder and harder to live in as the rest part of it has been knocked down. And again, they went in for wholesale bulldozing rather than keeping any of the old Salford alive. And this, of course, is by the river. And I think these are old flats. Do you think they are, or are they office bits? They look more like flats. So I couldn't quite make out what they were, really, but there you go.
No, sure.
Probably some kind of office thing. We'll move swiftly on from that. Young girls taking baby sister for a walk, 1969. Again, that's very typical of all the Manchester ones as well, isn't it? You can see all the derelict houses at the back.
Nothing.
Another, I think, lovely picture of a street scene from 1970. And this is, again, another of the Playstreets. Oh, this is back-to-backs. Can you see the difference between the back-to-backs and the terraced housing behind it?
Yeah, there's no entry.
That's the reason that they'd had the back-to-backs, because they took up less space. There was no backyard. And that's still there in 1971. I never knew that. I mean, they should have kept some of these. I mean, they'd probably be bijou flats now, wouldn't they? They've been done up a bit. But they all went. This I thought was interesting because this is from a Pinterest one. Shocking photos of Salford slums, flashback.
It's the word shocking, isn't it?
I don't see anything shocking about that photo, do you? It's got a corner shop, looks really clean, and the houses look well looked after. So I just thought it's interesting that people sometimes get the wrong end of the stick with these things. Now, I thought I'd just move towards the end of it, looking at what Salford's doing now. And this is the new 55-storey tower in Greengate, which is apparently the oldest part of Salford. I once got a job at the Greengate and Irwell Rubber Company over the summer holidays, working in an office there, which is one of the most boring jobs I ever had, I think. But it's of course, the firm long gone. But this is the proposed tower. It's got a cinema, a residence lounge, a communal roof terrace, and but of course, the vast majority of the city's residents will be priced out of it. There's no affordable housing included within the 545 apartments, which include plush rooftop penthouses. And though the developers suggested that some of the money they're providing could be used for affordable housing elsewhere, which is always the trick that Manchester's used as well. If it's affordable housing, we'll use it somewhere in Ardwick or Collyhurst, because you'll get bigger bang for your buck in terms of what you're getting. But it's not getting a mixed sort of residential area. And I think the developers are based in Hong Kong. And they want to this was in, I got this in November 21, so I don't know where it's up to at the moment. They want to get it started in this coming year, and that's the end of that.
Can I tell you about, just prompted me when it was like the Manchester Liners, you showed us on the slide. So my first job was in an office as an office junior, working for a flower company, Kingpin Flower. And I worked on a little mini switchboard, and we had an office manager called Mr. Bland, who smoked a pipe, walked up and down. But I used to wait for him to say in the morning, Miss Robbins, phone Manchester Liners. And that meant I had to ring before I put the call through to Mr. Bland. But I liked the lad that used to answer the phone at Manchester Liners. He had a lovely voice, and he'd go, hello, Maureen. I go, hello. That's all we did. I'll put you through. But that was a magic moment for me.
I thought you were going to say you then met and married him. It would have been a good conclusion, wouldn't it?
No, we never did, but I've got a picture of his face and what it was like. So obviously the grain was coming from somewhere. If the office manager had to ring, speak to Manchester Liners. But yes, I've got a little glow about me. Thank you for that.
You got very breathy then, Maureen.
I can't help myself.
I could hear the passion in the way you were saying it.
Anyway, we're in the last minute, so thank you for coming along.
No, I enjoyed that.
Thank you, Bernard.
And I'll put it up for anybody who's.
Oh, it's lovely, Bernard. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So,